Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. March 2014. In Amersfoort, Netherlands, there were two young women determined to explore the world despite their youth. Chris Kremers, a 21-year-old university graduate with a degree in cultural anthropology, known for her calm and analytical nature, and Lisanne Froon, a 22-year-old student with an interest in psychology, loved for her cheerful and creative personality. Although they had different fields of study, their shared passion for discovering new cultures and understanding the world brought them together. This shared passion led them to a journey in South America, to Panama. Their trip was meant to be more than just a vacation. Chris and Lisanne wanted to not only travel, but also learn Spanish and provide volunteer support to local communities. Their adventure, which began in Amersfoort, started with a few days in Panama City, the capital, where they made their first contact with the country's culture and prepared for their journey. They then traveled to the town of Boquete, in the western part of the country. This small mountain town, nestled at the foot of the Baru volcano, was surrounded by dense misty forests and was a popular spot for nature lovers. It was also where they would join a volunteer project teaching English to children. Before starting the project, they had a few days of free time which they decided to spend in nature. Among the many hiking routes around Boquete, the El Pianista Trail caught their interest. This route, well known among locals, was a narrow path through misty slopes. The hike was about 8 kilometers long and typically took 3 to 5 hours. And after a certain point, it entered a nearly untouched wilderness. Chris and Lisanne were not specially prepared for the hike. They did not hire a local guide, nor did they have equipment suited for a long nature hike. This decision would later be regarded as a critical choice in the investigation files. However, on that day, their only goal was to spend a few hours in nature and take photographs of Panama's unique landscape. Unfortunately, this hike would lead them down a path from which they would never return. On Tuesday morning, April 1, 2014, Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon left their guest house early. They had a small backpack with a few bottles of water, a map, some snacks, 2 mobile phones, one iPhone, the other Samsung, and a digital Canon camera. Their clothing was light, and they wore hiking shoes. They had no rain jackets, camping gear, or any other equipment suitable for staying outdoors for an extended period. Their destination was the El Pianista hiking trail, located to the north of Boquete. The trail was named after the mountain peak, which resembled a piano. The path winds through misty forests, occasionally becoming muddy, steep, and unmarked. While it was popular among tourists, the trail turns into a wilderness area where there is no phone signal past a certain point. The girls began their hike in the morning. Later, some locals would report seeing them at the entrance of the trail without a guide, a detail that would become an important element in the investigation after their disappearance. Normally, it was advised to hike with a guide on this route, but the two women likely underestimated the difficulty of the trail and the variable weather conditions. By the afternoon of that day, there was no word from Chris and Lisanne. They usually kept in regular contact with their families via WhatsApp, and their lack of communication initially did not raise much concern. However, as the evening progressed, their Panamanian host family began to worry. They had not returned for dinner, and they had not been seen all day, which prompted anxiety. The following morning, on April 2nd, the guesthouse owner alerted the local authorities. That same day, a volunteer search team was formed. Initially, the possibility of them having fallen or lost their way on the El Pianista Trail was considered. However, the first searches along the trail found no trace of them. The search efforts quickly expanded, and a more extensive team, including civil defense, Sinaproc, local police, and volunteers, began a systematic search of the forest. Less than 24 hours after the disappearance, the quiet mountains of Panama were echoing with the footsteps of dozens of people searching for the two Dutch travelers. But nature was not willing to give up its answers easily. After the official announcement of Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's disappearance, the search efforts were swiftly organized. Initially, Panamanian authorities, led by the civil defense organization Sinaproc, launched a large-scale search along the El Pianista Trail with local volunteers. The terrain was extremely challenging. The dense tropical forest, the damp and slippery ground, deep valleys and sudden elevations constantly slowed the progress of the teams. Additionally, the region's sudden fog and heavy rain made the weather conditions unpredictable. Tracking, dogs, drone-assisted searches, and helicopter observations were also used. However, no trace, belongings, or visible footprints were found. This raised suspicions that the disappearance might be more than just a simple case of getting lost. As time passed, various possibilities began to be discussed in the media, on social platforms, and even among the local community. Some believed the girls had fallen victim to an accident, while others associated them with darker scenarios, such as kidnapping or human trafficking. More extreme claims suggested involvement with secret cults or ritualistic murders. The families in the Netherlands grew increasingly worried after not hearing from their daughters for days. Diplomatic channels were activated. Soon, both a special search and rescue team and crisis management experts from the Netherlands were sent to Panama. The families also hired private detectives to conduct independent investigations at the scene. All resources were pooled, and a full-scale effort was launched in Boquete. Local businesses distributed posters, and volunteers continued to comb the mountain paths. While some areas showed mud-covered footprints, the identity of the owner of these marks could not be confirmed. By the second week of the search, hope began to fade. Questions remained unanswered, such as whether the girls had left the El Pianista Trail, taken a different direction, or perhaps left the area with someone's assistance. As weeks passed, the process became unbearable for the families, who were left only with speculations and no solid evidence. The only thing left behind by the missing girls was the void and silence. This silence felt like an invisible wall hidden within the mountains. Exactly 10 weeks after the missing persons report, on June 11, 2014, the first concrete evidence emerged, changing the course of the investigation. A local woman, walking along the Changuinola River about 17 kilometers northeast of Boquete, found a backpack by the riverbank. It appeared to have been carefully placed on the rocks, untouched by the current. The backpack was almost completely undamaged by mud or water. The woman took the bag and handed it over to the local authorities. Upon opening the backpack, the items inside offered the first direct clues about the girls. Inside were Lisanne Froon's passport, both young women's mobile phones, a Canon digital camera, 2 pairs of sunglasses, a call history with 83 attempted calls still recorded, some cash, and personal belongings. What was striking was that none of the items inside the bag appeared to be damaged. This raised the possibility that the bag had not fallen into the river, but had been deliberately placed there by someone. Experts initially focused on the mobile phones. Technical analysis of the devices began to shed more light on the situation. According to the phone records, the first emergency call was made at 4:39 p.m. on April 1st. Both Panama's emergency number, 911, and the European emergency number, 112, had been dialed multiple times on that day and the following days. However, due to the area's lack of signal, these calls either never went through or were cut off before a connection was made. Although the number of calls decreased after April 2nd, they continued. Some calls lasted only a few seconds, while others never connected at all. This suggested that the young women had been trying to survive for at least a few days and continued to seek help. Furthermore, it was found that the phones were systematically turned on and off to conserve battery. Particularly after April 4th, one of the phones had completely shut off, while the other continued to turn on periodically until April 6th. Another notable detail was that some attempts showed incorrect PIN codes being entered. This led investigators to discuss 2 possibilities. Either one of the devices had become unusable earlier than the other, or only one of the girls was still alive and trying to access her friend's phone. The data from the Canon camera would later provide further insight, adding a new dimension to this theory. However, even the phone records alone indicated that the 2 young women had struggled to survive for not just a few hours after they went missing, but at least 6 to 8 days. The contents of the backpack were silent witnesses, not only to their physical endurance but also to their psychological resistance. The digital camera found in the backpack added another layer of mystery to the case. This Canon PowerShot SX270 model camera contained hundreds of photos taken since the hike on April 1st. Some of these images depicted Chris and Lisanne enjoying a pleasant walk along the El Pianista Trail, smiling, moving forward along the path, and documenting the beauty of nature during daylight hours. The photos taken early on April 1st showed everything appearing normal. However, the most unusual and unexplained part of the device were the photos dated April 8, 2014. This date marked the 8th night since the girls went missing. Over 90 flash-lit, dark photos from that night completely changed the course of the investigation. Most of the images were too blurry or complicated in angle to clearly identify what they depicted. The photos were taken deep within the forest, late at night. In some of the shots, only specific areas were illuminated in the dense darkness. A rock surface, thick tree branches, close-ups of a backpack or plastic bag-like objects. One image seemed to show stones arranged neatly on the ground with scattered pieces of paper around them. In another photo, a red plastic object caught attention. It was suggested that it might have come from one of the missing girls' belongings. In one photo, the impression was given that a headlamp-like light source was placed on a rock, attached to a plastic strap. This suggested that the girls were trying to orient themselves in the dark or illuminate their surroundings. Some researchers argued that the flashlit photos might have been taken to either see the night environment or signal for help. One of the most debated images focused on a yellowish-orange object on the ground. It was speculated that this object might be a lock of Chris's hair or a piece of scalp. However, this claim was never definitively confirmed through forensic analysis. Despite experts examining the quality of the image, no conclusive result could be reached. Nevertheless, this photo sparked significant public and media attention. The mystery surrounding these nighttime photos, why and how they were taken, remains unresolved. Some theories suggest the girls were trying to navigate, improve their night vision, or deliberately leave a trail. Other interpretations suggest that these photos might have been taken in a state of panic or psychological breakdown, with no clear intent. There was no indication of a third party or direct signs of an attack in the photos. However, one thing was certain. These images proved that the girls were still alive at least 8 days after their disappearance and were actively struggling in the forest. Each frame was a trace, each flash an attempt to make their presence known in the dark. In July 2014, after nearly 3 months of their disappearance, a new search was initiated in the forested areas of Panama. This search led to the discovery of the most unexpected and chilling findings related to the missing Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. On July 19th, human bones were found in the depths of the forest near a collapsed path. Among the first findings were a femur bone, pelvic fragments, and a jawbone. DNA tests taken from the bones found in areas reported by locals confirmed that they belonged to Lisanne and Chris. After genetic analysis, it was confirmed that the bones belonged to the girls, but these findings raised a significant question. The condition of the bones revealed how much time had passed since their disappearance, and how environmental conditions in the forest had impacted the remains. The bones thought to belong to Lisanne were relatively less decomposed, indicating that she might have died more recently or been buried less deeply. In contrast, the bones thought to belong to Chris were significantly more decomposed. Some parts appeared to be dried, as if exposed to sunlight for an extended period. This suggested that Chris had been exposed to the sun for a longer period of time. This discovery raised the possibility that Chris's death occurred at a different time than Lisanne's. On the other hand, while the condition of the bones reflected the harsh conditions of time spent in the forest, other possibilities were also questioned. The autopsy reports complicated these findings further. No serious signs of trauma or physical violence were found on either woman's body. Only decomposition marks and the effects of natural conditions were observed. However, the autopsy results did not provide a clear cause of death. The absence of any signs of trauma, blows, or attack raised questions about whether the incident was an accident or a deliberate crime. The reports indicated that the nature of the death contained ambiguity. Over time, many theories arose about the events during the period since the girls went missing. Some tried to explain the disappearance as a mountain accident, but it was known that they had no experience in mountaineering, and such disappearances rarely lasted this long. Other speculation suggested that the girls had fought to survive but were unable to make it due to the harsh conditions of nature and their inadequate preparations. For years after their disappearance and deaths, the families were unable to obtain any concrete information. This uncertainty went beyond just the painful loss. The investigation, which began the moment Chris and Lisanne went missing, caused a ripple effect in Panama and worldwide, but no conclusive result was reached. Today, this disappearance case remains an unsolved mystery. It continues to be a frequently discussed topic on the internet, with new claims, theories, and investigations emerging from time to time. Every year, this disappearance is revisited with a new perspective or finding, although no definitive answer has been found about what lies behind Chris and Lisanne's disappearance. This tragic event has etched a deep mystery into the dark forests of Boquete, Panama, in memory of the two young women who vanished there.